good morning, everybody. Welcome back to Crafting and Crime Daily. This is the podcast where I describe what's going on in live trials on YouTube, either on Law and Crime, Court TV, individual news stations. I recap them for you daily, tell you what they're all about, what the evidence is showing, so you have something to listen to while you're crafting. It's an interesting concept, but I roll with it. I loved it. Oh my gosh. I love talking to you guys. I love seeing all your works in progress. What am I working on today? Well, I got my Enablers Outpost pens. I am actually doing 2 Halloween diamond paintings at the same time. One that I'm working on for my event with DP Addiction Adventures, Jennifer. That's a pumpkin, crystal canvas art pumpkin. And then I was so blown away by the stuff on Crystal Canvas Art Design's website that I bought a second Halloween painting from them. And here's what I worked on yesterday. It's got flowers and pumpkins in it. Is that not the oh, it's gorgeous. Isn't it gorgeous? Yes. Okay. Oh, and of course, my release papers with my artwork on there. Yeah. All the links to these companies are down in the description. Some even have discount codes that you can use if you want to go to their site and make a purchase. So, what's going on today? Well, first and foremost, Cara Rentala is still waiting for a jury verdict in the case where she is alleged to have murdered her wife, Anna Marie Rentala. Yeah. Now, this is the 4th trial. The first 2 trials ended in hung juries. The 3rd trial ended with a guilty verdict, but that was overturned by the courts because of a paint expert. I feel like I'm lopsided today because of a paint expert. So this is trial number 4. Evidence is in the books. We've all heard all the evidence about how she came home, found her dead in the basement, and there was paint everywhere. She suffered blunt force trauma to the head and was manually strangled to death. So, and Cara Rentala has an alibi for most of the day, but not all of the day. Yeah, so there's a window of time in which she could have committed this murder. The evidence is not terribly strong, so there's certainly reason to believe that the jurors could be arguing over, is there enough to overcome reasonable doubt? So we know that there was a debacle with the jury, I guess Friday. The judge brought them back yesterday, the jurors. He interviewed each one of them sidebar. Now, and then he dismissed 2 of the jurors, replaced them with alternates. He also dismissed one of the alternates. And he told the rest of the jury that it was for personal reasons, and then he told the jury, come back today and you'll begin your deliberations again. So they've done that. But this morning, before he let them resume their deliberations, he read to them an instruction. He says, I want you to remember that you need to base your verdict on the evidence that was presented in this case, not for, don't base your verdict on what the consequences of that verdict may be. So that leads me to believe that they might have been questioning what are the consequences of maybe a hung jury. I don't know. So they are deliberating. I'm having coffee in my winter gnome cup, even though it's still summer. Has anybody emailed Mother Nature and said, hey, it's fall? I hope so, because today we're supposed to have like a horrendous storm with hail and wind, and there's not a sign of it anywhere outside. It's a little overcast, but if you to listen to the newscaster, you'd think, like whatever. Anyway, they're always so dramatic, aren't they? Especially in Wichita, there's also so much drama around the weather, and then nothing happens. No weather. Anyway, it's supposed to be a cold front, so this is kind of wishful thinking. Cold front. It is supposed to cool off significantly for the next 4 or 5 days, and I am so happy. I want to get my winter stuff out. I have some cute sweaters. I've got all my cute little hats that I've made. I want to wear them all. So All right, so the next case is the Kowalski case. This is Maya Kowalski. She was the patient who suffered from chronic regional pain syndrome. She is suing along with her brother Kyle and her father Jack. Her mother Beata committed suicide. She was being held against her will, against her parents' will, in Johns Hopkins Children's Hospital for 87 days. Now, Johns Hopkins is using a defense by saying, we didn't do it. It was GCF. It was Department of Children and Families. They're the ones that held her there for so long. It wasn't us. We were just following orders of the court. Anyway, whatever. So yesterday, Jack took the stand. Jack Kowalski, who is Maya's father, took the stand. And he is still on the stand. Yeah, he took the stand. And by the end of the day, the judge asked the plaintiff's counsel, you got a lot more. Oh, lots more. Okay, well, we're going to resume tomorrow. So it started again today. And we haven't even gotten to cross-examination yet. But I'm going to tell you a little bit about what Jack had to say. Now, you guys by now have probably guessed I'm not so enamored with this plaintiff attorney. I just don't think his skill base is where it should be for this big of a trial. So we learned that Jack is 62 years old, that he uh, growing up, he became a fire cadet, and basically firefighting, that was his whole life. Like he was a fire dispatcher when he was in high school. He would work and he would live at the fire station and then go to school, and yeah, he loved the fire thing. So he had a long career as a paramedic firefighter and ended up being like the chief before he retired. So he went through his whole outline of his firefighter career. And he went out one night with some friends and they introduced him to Beata, and he just knew that was it. He was smitten. And he said it wasn't very long after that they ran off and got married. In fact, their family were kind of upset that they ran off and got married, and they had to have a second wedding that everybody got to come to. So in 2014, he retired from the fire department after 28 and a half years of service. And he included service like he had been to when Katrina hit in New Orleans. He had gone down there on humanitarian missions. And then on 9/11, he had gone to New York for humanitarian reasons and helped out in New York, mostly with by humanitarian. He explained he was in Katrina, he was helping, like the fire stations were out of commission. So he and his team helped get those fire stations back up and running. And then in New York, kind of the same thing, supplying, helping out the firefighters up there, basically, is what he was doing. So he talked about Beata, that she came over from Poland when she was 16 years old. Had a little bit of trouble with the language. She was very determined, which Maya seems to take after her mom, very much so, very determined. Beata was very determined to learn the language. She did. She ended up graduating top of her class. She went on to college, became a nurse. Um, when he met her, she was a cardiac cath nurse. And the plaintiff attorney didn't even seem to realize what a cardiac cath nurse is. And he's like, so she did catheterizations all day. And he's like, yeah, something with catheterizations. Like, let me just tell you, if you are a cardiac cath nurse, you know your stuff. You got to know your stuff. Like I, when I was a risk manager, I would spend a lot of time in the cardiac cath lab because we had some doctors that would just fly off the handle and start abusing nurses. And I wanted to shut that down. So I spent a lot of time in the cardiac cath lab, and I was very impressed by those nurses. Like these doctors are taking a catheter and putting it into people's hearts. This is just not a catheterization. It This is a heart procedure that these nurses are assisting with, and the patients have to be awake, and they have to, anyway. I was so impressed with those nurses, really impressed. So Beata was a cardiac cath nurse. And I don't need, I say all of that to say that I don't think the plaintiff attorney or Jack gave the jury a good sense of the kind of nurse she was. She knew her stuff. She was a really good nurse. Now, at the time that all this went down with Maya, she was working as an infusion nurse. Now, she was a cardiac cath nurse when she met Jack at a really famous hospital, Loyola University up in Chicago. So they get married, they settle down, they have the kids. Maya was an IVF baby because they couldn't conceive, and so they had her through IVF. And then Kyle was kind of a surprise. Surprise, baby. He came home one day and she's like, guess what? And she's like, I'm pregnant. Yeah, no effort for that one. So she taught the kids Polish, which he says Kyle doesn't really, he's kind of lost it now because since Beata's gone, because he was so young when she committed suicide. But Maya has retained some of the Polish that she learned. So she had Maya in ice skating, ballet, gymnastics, and piano, all by the time she was 3 years old. Now Maya has since tried to go back to ice skating, but because it was so intertwined with her mom emotionally, she couldn't do it. Now, yesterday, when I recapped what was going on in this trial, I questioned how did all this come about? Like, was it all of a sudden? You know, and Jack explained it all. I'm like, wow, he must have been listening to my show because he kind of explained how it came about. So, 4th of July, prior to 4th of July, they just had the asthma problem that they were dealing with. And between June 17th and July 6th, yeah, she had asthma and she had this nagging cough. On 4th of July, it became really, really bad, this cough. So they took her, Beata took her to the emergency room. They thought it was kind of a weird cough, too. And so Beata takes her to the emergency room and they treat it and they send her back home. So, and that's John Hopkins, goes to John Hopkins. Then again on July 17th, she was having difficulty breathing, generalized acute pain. And this is the first time she had all this pain. And it was kind of all over. And Jack and Beata had never seen this before. So they took her back to John Hopkins, and she was diagnosed with uh, generalized acute pain, steroid myopathy. So the hospital thought that all of this pain was a result of steroids. This was all new. So then they put her on Toradol and oxycodone to control the pain. And someone at the hospital, Jack could not remember who it was, but someone actually said, we don't know what's wrong with her. We don't know what's wrong with her, but we can give her pain medication. And Beata did not like that answer. And I'm a nurse. I wouldn't like that answer. I want to know what's wrong with my child. So she wanted to find out, don't just say, oh, I'm going to treat him with pain. Oxycodone for a 9-year-old? I don't think so. So so they took her to Chicago to a hospital called Lurie's Hospital. And Lurie's evaluated her and recommended inpatient rehabilitation. So they came back to Naples, and Beata was working, and she was doing an infusion for a patient over in Naples. And this patient overheard a phone call that she got from a nurse practitioner and from the hospital. And when she got off the phone, he said, what you're describing sounds an awful lot like CRPS, chronic regional pain syndrome. My child has that, and they go down to Mexico for these treatments, for ketamine treatments. Maybe you should check out, think along those lines and talk about uh, Dr. Kirkpatrick. Now, at this point, Jack was asked, was there any precipitating injury? Like, did she get injured that, something that would have triggered all of this pain? And he said no. There was nothing he could remember that she did any of this. And he pointed out that on July 4th, they had had their little bike parade. The whole neighborhood would have this bicycle parade. They had video of it. And then Jack would throw this big barbecue. And you could see Maya. She's riding a bicycle. She's fine. So, so at this point, this is in 2015. She's fine. And now she's got this generalized pain. They're trying to figure out what it is. Jack mentioned that um, this is not doesn't even fit chronologically, but this is where it was mentioned. He had a home up in Elmhurst. They had a home up in Elmhurst um, that they ended up selling because they needed it to pay the medical bills. So they he continued to walk Jack through all the providers that he took her to, all the different hospitalizations that she had. And a lot of those hospitalizations were at John Hopkins. And he would say during each hospitalization, did anybody question the diagnosis of CRPS? Nobody questioned it. They just they would treat her with ketamine, they would send her home. So it wasn't until October. So what happened in October was, well, it actually started in September. Over the summer, because of all this, this all happened over the summer. July 4th started. So when it's time for school to start, they wanted her to be homeschooled so that she could continue physical therapy. By now, she's gone to Dr. Kirkpatrick. He has recommended warm water therapy. So Jack said we even installed extra solar panels on our house so the pool would be extra warm. Like it was like a warm water bath for Maya. And that's something he tried even before he started her on ketamine. So he wanted her to continue her therapy. They're so they wanted her to be homeschooled. Well, at one point, so she starts homeschooling, and then at some point she is asked to be present at a fundraiser. So she goes to this fundraiser in her wheelchair, and one of the teachers sees her there and says, "If you can come to this fundraiser in your wheelchair, you can go to school." So they said, "No, you can't be homeschooled anymore." So Jack had to get his family physician to fill out this application to get her homeschooled, saying that, why she needed it and blah, blah, blah. And Jack had to hire a lawyer to get her to continue to be homeschooled. So all of this stress was building up on Maya, and the pain was getting worse and worse and worse. And this is all what led up to that October hurricane admission to John Hopkins. Now, all these admissions prior to this, no healthcare provider at John Hopkins had ever mentioned conversion disorder or Munchausen's by proxy, or that they thought it was anything other than what the parents were telling them, that it was chronic regional pain syndrome. But apparently, on this October admission, somebody got a bee in their bonnet and decided, hey, this is Munchausen's by proxy. I think Beata went in there with her controlling nurse personality and said, this is what she has, this is what she needs, and she probably pissed somebody off. So he describes the October admission, um, that she was kind of thrashing around. He said she was in a lot of pain. He said they were staying at the Ronald McDonald House, he and Beata, because she was scheduled. They were in Lakeland. Lakeland? I don't remember. Anyway, they're staying at the Ronald McDonald House because she was supposed to go to Dr. Hannah, another doctor that was giving her ketamine, for a treatment the following day. But the pain was so bad that night they take her to John Hopkins. So they take her to John Hopkins, and they got such negativity from John Hopkins. They were like, we're just going to take her out and take her to her treatment. And they're like, no, you're not. If you remove her, we're going to have you arrested. This goes on. That's a Friday when they bring her in. So this goes on Saturday. They say the same thing. We want to take her out. We want her to get her treatment. And they're saying, no, we will have you arrested if you remove her. Because the attorney's like, why didn't you just leave? Why didn't you just take her and leave? We couldn't. They were threatening us with arrest. We could not remove her. We couldn't remove our daughter to go get her treatment. and they were like cold turkeying her from the ketamine. And so the next question was, well, was she suffering from any withdrawals as a result of taking the ketamine away? And he said, no, no. But she was in a tremendous amount of pain. So that's where they left off. So that's where I will pick up today watching that trial. So now, sip of coffee. Mm-mm-mm. Oh, that coffee's so good. That's my second cup, in case you haven't noticed. So Timothy and Tracy Farrader, they were arrested for falsely imprisoning their son, Ronan Farrader. Leading up to today's trial, it just started today. They picked a jury yesterday, and the trial against Timothy Farrader started today. I covered this probably about a month ago when the judge granted their motion to sever the trial. So Tracy's having a separate trial than Timothy, which I'm surprised that they're letting them do that. And I got to just as an aside, I have to mention that when I saw the courtroom this morning, I have tried cases in this courtroom in Palm Beach County, and I was like, oh, that brings back so many memories. Yeah, it just did. It was just a little bit of nostalgia there. And I'm not going to tell you if there was. I'm trying to remember the one I tried a workers' comp case there. Not a workers' comp. I don't remember, but I've tried cases in that courtroom. Different judge, because this is 100 years ago. Yeah. Anyway, I digress. So Timothy Farrader's on trial. So he's got a darn good lawyer. She's good. She can talk her way out of a paper bag. This woman, I tell you. So the opening statements. So Ronan Farrader apparently is now 16 years old. He goes by the name of Ty. So you'll hear me refer to him as Ronan or Ty. At the time of the allegations between December 2021 and January of 2022, he is being charged. Dad is being charged with aggravated child abuse, child neglect, and false imprisonment during that period of time. And the prosecutor is very um, careful to point out that they're not alleging that the child was falsely imprisoned this entire time, but there were periods of time during uh, that time frame, that 1 month time frame, where he was falsely imprisoned. So he was adopted as a toddler from Vietnam, and this was the second child that they had adopted. I don't know where they adopted the first one from, but they wanted to have them. They wanted the two to have similar backgrounds, Oriental backgrounds. So he has this older sister, and then after they adopted these two, they had two children naturally. So on on January 28th, mom reports that Ronan is missing. She calls the police, and this is a Friday. She reports that the child is missing. So he doesn't show up Friday. The police take the report. He doesn't show up Saturday. So on Sunday, the police go back to Tracy Farrader, to the home, and they say, anything happened? Has he come back home? And she's like, no, he has not returned home. So at this point, the officers, and we're going to hear that this is the officer that's going to take the stand first. He'll be the first one to testify. So we're going to hear a lot more detail about what happened on that Sunday and how he got past Tracy to discover that Ronan was living in a box in the garage. This child had no bedroom in the house, no place to sleep inside the house. He was sleeping in a box that was constructed in the garage. This structure had a bucket that he would use to overnight when he was locked in here, that he could use as a restroom, that he would have to clean out the next day. Dad would tell him, "Get it, go outside, clean it out. Don't let the neighbors see you." He had a desk. He had school books. He had one book that he could read for entertainment. He had I think she said a MacBook for school, and a box spring and a mattress, and a ring camera. Yes. So the police did something I thought was very clever. They did a search warrant to the ring camera company, and they got all the footage from the ring camera. And I can't wait to see this footage. What was going on with this child? So Monday morning comes, and Ronan goes to school, and that's how they find him. They go in there. Here he is. He's in school, and he proceeds to tell them how he's been locked in this box, and he also tells them that they had the reason this is confined to 1 month is they had lived in Jupiter before. This is in Jupiter, Florida, in Palm Beach County. They had lived in Jupiter, moved up to Arizona for several years, and then moved back. They had just moved back prior to, in December. So they had only been living there for a month. But this child tells the police that he had a very similar structure up in Arizona that they had been keeping him in since he was 11. Now, he's not been charged with any of that. He's just charged with December, that 1 month, December to January. So we're gonna find out what the ring camera stuff shows. We're gonna hear from Ronan or Ty. We're gonna hear from the police officer. We're gonna hear from a psychologist who's gonna testify to the impact that keeping him in this room, caused to this child. And she also mentioned that, it's not an excuse to say that your child was out of control. There's no different standard of raising children if you have a difficult child. It's not a defense that, you have a difficult child so you can put him in a box in the garage. No. So then we hear from the prosecution or the defense. And she starts out by saying, parents have a responsibility to protect their children. That these parents were faced with an impossible situation. They had to make tough choices to protect Ronan, their child, to protect their other children. Apparently, they were afraid for this newborn that they had, that he might hurt the newborn. And they were afraid of what he might do in the community. So they used this room to watch him when they couldn't watch him. So he wasn't locked in here 24/7, just when they couldn't watch him. He did come out for dinner sometimes, and it was allowed to join the rest of the family for some periods of time. So this attorney points out to the jury that the only thing that they're going to be asked to decide that they need to focus on in this case is, did Timothy Ferriter have any criminal intent? And I'll tell you, ladies and gentlemen, no, he did not. He was, did he make the right choice? Probably not the best choice to keep his kid in a box. But she says bad parenting is not a crime. Excuse me? It can be. Yes, ma'am, it can be. Anyway, that's what she's saying. So, yeah, I had to laugh when she said that. So she said that he had a consistent escalation of his behavioral issues that he had under. We're going to hear from their side as well, a psychologist that testified that he had a neuropsych evaluation that showed he had an increase in emotional regulation and an increase in lack of inhibition. Both are traits that are associated with early life development. And then she points out that how in Vietnam he was in an orphanage and he was neglected, and all of this caused him to be the way he is now. So that's the case. Yeah, I pick your jaws up. Yes, it's just bad parenting, not a crime. Keep your kid in a box. So this is going to be an interesting trial. Yes, very interesting. All right, guys, that's the show for today. I hope you guys were entertained, that you got some crafting done. And don't forget to subscribe. It's absolutely free. You can also make a one-time donation to support the content of the channel by hitting that super thanks button. And I will see you tomorrow in Crafting and Crime Daily. Bye, everybody.